My basement's flooded. Superman has been in existence since 1938. He is the original and perhaps best well-known example of what a comic book superhero is. He's been many things throughout his 81-year history, but the one thing he's never been is forgotten. To this day, Superman still appears in movies, TV shows, video games, and of course, comics. And whenever somebody wants to parody the genre, Superman is always the archetype they first go to. But while he's never exactly been forgotten, there's been this prevailing idea that Superman just isn't relevant in the 21st century. There's this sense that modern audiences aren't really connecting with this incredible being who's super invincible and can pretty much do anything. And this has been a particular issue for Warner Brothers, who as recently as last week have confirmed that they're trying to fix this problem. How do you make a Superman movie in this day and age that is relevant to modern American audiences? Which is funny because really, Superman is not the problem. It's the idea that Superman is irrelevant that's the problem. Last week, Variety put out an article detailing Warner Brothers' future plans for their DC films, now that they're no longer so adherent to trying to make a Marvel-style cinematic universe happen. There was talk of more R-rated stuff like James Gunn's Suicide Squad movie, the desire for more standalone films like Matt Reeves' upcoming Batman movie. There's apparently a big push to do Green Lantern again, which, okay, I can get behind that. But really what's gotten most people talking is the plan for Superman. Specifically that there isn't really a plan. There have been talks with people like Michael B. Jordan and J.J. Abrams, but nothing has really moved forward. The problem seems to be that Warner Brothers just doesn't know how to make Superman relevant with kids these days. So let's try to unpack this here. So from Warner Brothers' perspective, I can kind of see why they think this. In the 21st century, no Superman movie has really connected with audiences the way similar films have. The first attempt at trying to do a modern 21st century Superman movie was Superman Returns in 2006, and this did not work. It was trying to invoke the style and feel of the Richard Donner Superman film, but wound up being a pale imitation. It was like The Force Awakens without any of the passion. It was long, ponderous, lifeless, often boring, and didn't do anything to remind people of why they liked Superman in the first place. 7 years later, Warner Brothers would try again with Man of Steel in 2013. This movie went in the complete opposite direction of Superman Returns, and it also didn't really work all that well. The film was much darker and more action-oriented than Superman Returns was. But in the process of trying to correct for the mistakes of the previous movie, they went too far in the opposite direction. It had a very dark and muted visual aesthetic, action scenes felt like they never ended, Metropolis and Smallville are practically leveled from all the chaos, and Superman looks pissed off a lot in this movie.
You think you can threaten my mother?
While both films have their fans, neither one of them really set the world on fire. Both of them got middling reviews from critics, and while the box office returns were respectable, neither one of them were the massive hits like other superhero films were. Like, Superman Returns actually made more money than Batman Begins did. That movie just didn't have the same cultural impact as Christopher Nolan's film. Man of Steel made more money than both of those movies, but they still felt the need to throw Batman into the sequel to get more people interested in it. And to their credit, more people were interested in that sequel, Batman vs. Superman. It's just that nobody was really interested in the Superman part of the title. They were interested in Ben Affleck's Batman, Gal Gadot's Wonder Woman, all the controversy surrounding it, not the second title character of the movie, who only had 43 lines over the course of 2.5 hours. The point is, there really hasn't been the one definitive 21st century Superman movie. A movie that not only do most people agree is good, but that really showcases why Superman is awesome and why his world and him as a character is important. Now, the prevailing mentality as to why this is simply because Superman is just a dated character. I mean, after all, he was created almost 80 years ago during a time when square-jawed American heroes were all the rage. He's a goody two-shoes character who's simply too much of a goody two-shoes for this day and age. There's no way translating him into the 21st century could possibly work. But if that was truly the case, why is Captain America so popular? Seriously, these two characters are very similar. They were both created around the same time. They're both straight-laced, all-American men, perfect in almost every way. They're both considered paragons of good and never falter in their emotions. Really, it's very easy to consider both of these characters dated and of their time. And yet, Captain America is currently one of the most popular characters in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. He's been the star of 7 different films, and often his solo films are considered to be the best of the entire MCU. Now, if you're thinking to yourself, well, that's Marvel, it's a little different. Superman is a DC character. Wonder Woman, who is also a DC character, is another superhero who many would consider dated and not in touch with the 21st century, and yet she is currently basically the figurehead of the DC movie universe. But okay, maybe that's just because that's Captain America and Wonder Woman. They are, after all, very different characters from Superman. Superman is basically a god. He's nigh indestructible and he's super strong. How exactly is a modern audience supposed to relate to a character like that? Well, I don't know specifically about relating to Superman, but I do know that people are interested in seeing Superman stories. And I'm not just talking about the 2 Superman films everybody generally agrees are excellent. Hell, I'm not even talking about movies at all. Superman has actually had a lot of success on television. Since 1993, Superman has been on TV in some capacity with shows that have not only been very popular, but also been critically acclaimed for finding successful ways to modernize the character for their respective audiences. Lois and Clark, The New Adventures of Superman, may seem dated now, but at the time it was praised for showing a more personal, romantic take on the titular relationship. And it was one of the first shows to showcase Clark Kent as being the true persona, while Superman was actually the disguise. Superman the Animated Series came next, and it's my personal favorite take on the character. It's well remembered for being just as complex, mature, and faithful to the source material as its sister show, Batman the Animated Series. I mean, again, Clancy Brown as Lex Luthor, people. And not only that, Dana Delaney as Lois Lane. The best Lois Lane, there is no argument. Next came Smallville, and look, I'm not the biggest fan of the show. I've been on record as saying as much, but even I have to admit that this show was very popular. It'd been on the air for 10 years. People really dug the idea of Clark Kent before he became the Man of Steel, trying to find his place in the world. I mean, it took him a really long time to find that place, but sure, whatever. And currently, there's Supergirl, which is basically just Superman, but starring a woman. Seriously, most of the stories are just Superman stories starring Supergirl instead, but it seems to be working. The show's in its 5th season now and shows no signs of slowing down. Now, you may not be a fan of all of these shows. In fact, you may think some or all of them completely suck. But the point is, these are successful shows that have dedicated fan bases and a certain amount of acclaim to them. They all found ways to take a character who many consider dated and out of touch and found ways to make him relevant for their respective audience. And plus, if he really is that irrelevant, how come there are going to be 3 different versions of him in the upcoming Crisis on Infinite Earths miniseries? Riddle me that. And this is, of course, not even touching upon the comics, where Superman has been a mainstay of the DC universe for decades. The point is, Superman himself is clearly not the problem. Many creators have found ways to make him work in a modern setting throughout various different media adaptations, be it comics, television, not video games yet, obviously, but give it time, that'll happen one day. So what's the problem then? Well, much like everything in Hollywood, the problem lies with the idiots at the top. The first Superman movie of the 21st century relied heavily on nostalgia rather than trying to create something truly modern for the time. The second Superman movie of the 21st century went so far in the other direction that many people felt it was far removed from the Superman that they were used to. But that's not really the character's fault. That's the fault of the filmmakers misreading what audiences really wanted out of Superman. I'm not saying that Superman doesn't need some sort of an update. Most comic book superheroes do need some form of modernization, otherwise they come across as hokey, quaint, and even anachronistic in certain cases. But he can be updated and made relevant again without the need to make him too much of a goody two-shoes or not enough of a goody two-shoes. It's worked well for other characters, it can work well for him. The key is to focus on the core facts of Superman. Yes, he's often depicted as super nice and caring, but use that, show that he can be a beacon of hope to people regardless of the situation. Yes, he is super strong and near invulnerable, but there are plenty of antagonists who can go toe to toe with him. And you can put him in situations that push him to his limits and have him overcome these impossible odds. Really, this tweet from Neil Gaiman says it all. It's not about making him relevant, it's more about making him inspirational. He should inspire people. This is why all the best loved adaptations of Superman work, because they were able to create a sense of wonder and awe that weren't just from scenes of him flying for really long periods of time or him blowing up even by accident. They showed Superman being Superman, using his position as the ultimate life form to not only improve the world, but the lives of the people in that world. Superman should not be 100% nostalgia, and he should not spend a lot of time brooding and destroying things, but he should be 100% inspirational, a character that people can look up to more so than any other superhero out there. There are several moments in Wonder Woman where she inspires other characters. The No Man's Land scene springs to mind. The liberation of the Belgian city is also a really great example. And everybody is always talking about how good Captain America is at giving inspiring speeches. Even in the movies themselves, they reference it.
He's pretty good at that, right?
This kind of stuff should be applied to Superman, and it can easily be done. You just have to stop overthinking it. Let the character do the work. Let the character inspire you to write the story, and then you will wind up with a great Superman tale for 2019 and beyond. Or you can just give the character to Rob Liefeld. He guarantees it will be a hit under his pen. Why not? Do you think Superman is irrelevant in the 21st century? How would you reinvent him to help him try to connect with the youth of today? Or do you think he's fine just the way he is, and it's actually the filmmakers who don't get the character? Let me know down below or anywhere on the internet. For the record, Rob Liefeld did reinvent Superman in the 90s. Sorta, he created Supreme, which was his take on the character. It was very violent and very typical of Image Comics of the time. That series did not get good until Alan Moore surprisingly took over and reinvented it as more of an homage to 60s era Superman comics. So make of that what you will. I will have Amazon links in the description to some good ass Superman stuff that prove he isn't dated or irrelevant. It just takes the right story to get the idea across. And don't forget that we have new videos every Tuesday and Wednesday, with Wednesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern being Wulff Den Live. So subscribe to see all of that. Like this video and share it with a friend who's super into Man of Steel and needs somebody to yell at, because if there's anything I've learned, saying that you don't like a Zack Snyder DC film is the quickest way to get yelled at on the internet. Although, to be fair, Man of Steel probably is his best DC work. That's not saying much. Thank you all for watching. I will see you next time.